What's up, everybody? Welcome to a PNNN special report on 16 CFR Part 1272, a new Consumer Product Safety Commission rule that has quickly raised a lot of questions in the foam flinging community with very few accurate answers. We spent the last few days laboriously researching, conducting interviews, and watching way too much C-SPAN. We're gonna do our best here to report on this in a fact-based way in an effort to clarify the possible effects of this rule on the foam flinging hobby, as well as what you can do to support the businesses that serve us. Since not everyone may have the time to watch our full special report, we're going to start off with the TLDR version of what's happening with a straightforward recommendation on action you can take. In the simplest possible terms, the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission has used a direct final rule process to fast-track a new rule regulating the manufacture and sale of, quote, look-alike firearms, unquote, a poorly defined term that may include airsoft, paintball, or even gel ball, possibly even higher power foam projectile equipment. Although it has no direct effect on individual hobbyists or their blasters, the regulation requirements in this rule could have a significant effect on the companies, large and small, that currently play a part in all tagging hobbies. The new rule has an effective date of June 26th with an open comment period lasting until June 12th. As a regular part of CSPC's process, if they receive enough negative comment during this period, they will reconsider this rule. PNNN strongly recommends that foam flingers, like you, leave comments. We have provided a form letter you can use down in the description, courtesy of Tinkershot and others, along with a link to the public comment page on regulations.gov. If you're ready to go leave a comment right now, be sure to come on back for all the details in the rest of our special report. Next up, we'll cover a brief history of toy gun regulation to give you context to this new rule, followed by a more detailed description of what this rule actually does, and finally, we'll debunk some of the myths that have quickly spread throughout the foam flinging community.
Mr. President, I move the Senate concur in the amendment of the House with a further amendment from the Senate, which I send to the desk on behalf of Senator Jolt.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Alaska, Mr. Stevens, for Mr. Dole, proposes an amendment numbered 3631.
President, I ask unanimous that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Is the Dole amendment adopted?
That has been adopted.
I thank the Chair.
In 1988, before Nerf made dart blasters and before airsoft even existed, the Federal Energy Management Improvement Act, FEMIA, was signed into law, primarily managing energy usage in federal offices. In response to highly publicized police shootings of kids with toy guns, Republican Senator from Kansas Bob Dole introduced an amendment that established punishments for the manufacture or import of imitation firearms, without the kinds of visual safety indicators we're used to in our hobby today. Enforcement of these rules was made the responsibility of the Secretary of Commerce. Fast forward to 2008, the year the original Recon and the Vulcan were released, spurred on by a series of lead poisoning incidents in 2007.
Thomas the Toxic Crane.
The Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, CPSIA, was passed in a bipartisan act of Congress, which built on the 1972 Consumer Product Safety Act by increasing the budget of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC, and giving them a number of new responsibilities. It also created a new method by which the CPSC could fast-track rule changes that they felt were non-substantive, minor changes.
When we were doing amendments to regulations, when we are doing technical, non-controversial kinds of regulations, we could do two-part rulemaking, just do a notice of proposed rulemaking and then a final rule, as opposed to the three-step rulemaking which is under our statute.
In 2013, the year of the strife and the rapid strike, the Secretary of Commerce moved the 1988 imitation firearms language to 15 CFR Part 272. By this point, it included a reference to specifications drafted by the American Society for Testing and Materials, ASTM, defining warning labels, performance requirements, and test methods intended to keep non-powder guns safe. This is what defines, among other things, the FPS numbers we see in stock blasters today. Finally, we come to 2022, the time of Adventure Force Pro, Elite 2.0, and Nerf Limited. Facing a nationwide shortage of computer chips for manufacturing, Congress passed the Creating Helpful Incentives to Produce Semiconductors, or CHIPS, Act, providing grants to domestic chip manufacturers. Democratic New York Senator and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer introduced an amendment that, among many other things, reassigned the responsibility for imitation firearm regulation to the CPSC by editing the original 1988 FIMIA text. This brings us up to the present with a CPSC newly tasked with enforcing 30-year-old regulations, while in the intervening decades, hobbyists and companies have advanced light years. On May 11th, 2023, the CPSC posted a direct final rule, 16 CFR Part 1272, which essentially copies the 1988 regulation language and attempts to incorporate other relevant rules, including the ASTM standard. The revival of old language immediately raised quite a few questions for companies manufacturing equipment used by airsoft and foam hobbyists. First among them is look-alike firearm. While the intent of this term may have been clear at the time of its original use in 1988, the tagging hobbies essentially didn't exist at the time, and the variety of things that could fall under this term have widened exponentially. Does it need to actually look like a specific firearm to be considered a look-alike, or does it simply need to have a barrel and a trigger? Is a Rapid Strike or a Nexus Pro a look-alike? How about the Fortnite LP or the Dart Zone Mark II? How about now? The second major issue is certification requirements. Section G of the new rule cites the original Consumer Product Safety Act, appearing to state that look-alike and imitation firearms that are not children's products are required to issue what's called a General Conformity Certification, or GCC, a process usually involving third-party testing. For context, while the regular blasters with age ranges up to 12 are regulated as toys with their own third-party certification requirements, airsoft, paintball, gel ball, and even pro-level foam products are marketed and sold as sporting goods intended for teens and adults, generally with a 14+ age recommendation on the box, and not currently subject to third-party certification. Were the rule to go into effect on June 26th, and a GCC requirement to be placed on this look-alike category, there is a large quantity of product, airsoft, paintball markers, pro-level foam blasters, currently in shipping that could be rejected at the US border because they were shipped without a GCC. Thankfully, according to Blasterface, the CPSC has just recently officially confirmed that the third-party certification only applies to toys, so this immediate concern shouldn't be a problem, but the text of the rule is still ambiguous. Section G seems to refer to this requirement, but the exclusion of look-alike firearms from the CPSC's list of general use products requiring a GCC appears to be the deciding factor. They are subject to the requirement, but not included in the requirement, leaving the possibility to include them in the future if the CPSC deems it necessary. Additionally, the direct final rule process skips over the usual requirements of the Regulatory Flexibility Act, which is designed to protect small businesses from regulations intended for larger companies. As we all know, the tagging hobbies are served by a network of amazing small businesses, so this seems like a potential problem as well. Ultimately, 16 CFR Part 1272 seems to be a rushed document. It has no immediate impact on individuals currently engaged in our hobby, but the outdated and vague language could cause a lot of confusion for the companies, large and small, that serve our hobby. Luckily, the opportunity for public comment is specifically designed for this kind of situation, and by speaking up, we can help them recognize a thriving and diverse market that requires more careful consideration before regulations are enacted. Finally, we'd like to take a moment to defuse some common misconceptions about this rule that have spread rapidly throughout our community. Maybe you've heard some of these from understandably anxious hobbyists, and hopefully with this information, you can do your part to calm the panic. Let's start out with...
The Nerf hobby is over. They're specifically targeting us.
There is no actual evidence that the CPSC is even particularly aware of our hobby. The current rule change doesn't directly impact Nerf or our hobby at all, only potentially companies that manufacture pro-level equipment. Additionally, it's worth remembering that those businesses are not the hobby. We are the hobby. The hobby existed before those businesses, and it would continue to exist after.
My blasters are going to become illegal. I'm gonna have to turn them in.
Absolutely not. The CPSC is a regulatory body that makes rules pertaining to businesses manufacturing products and putting them on the market. There are no rules or laws involved in this entire situation that directly affect individuals owning or selling blasters in any way.
This law doesn't affect us. All it does is restrict milsim.
First of all, it's not a law, simply a rule change, but on the flip side of what the last couple guys said, this is also untrue. Although the current rule change doesn't directly affect us, there is ambiguity in the definition of hobby-grade blasters, most currently considered and regulated as sporting goods that could get the companies that serve our hobby in a lot of trouble if the CPSC decided to fast-track additional regulation, which is why convincing the SPC to do their research and properly regulate the industry, or leave it alone, is so important for us in the long run.
We can't do anything about this. Our comments mean nothing to them.
This has already been disproven. When the rule hit around 500 comments, the CPSC immediately started communicating with the ASTM committee in charge of these products, so these comments have already had an effect.
This is all happening because the liberals want to take our guns. Those New York politicians, they're targeting all the shooting sports.
Whoa, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. Admittedly, this is a tricky one that can't technically be fully disproven, which is why it's such a powerful talking point with the right people. In the last few years, the media have covered a number of crimes committed with airsoft, paintball, and gel ball equipment. These events were high enough profile in New York City to inspire the creation of a citywide law limiting these products, which was used as the basis for statewide laws soon after. But correlation isn't causation. Although the CHIPS Act was sponsored by Chuck Schumer, a Democratic senator from New York and the current Senate Majority Leader, it was also co-sponsored equally by Todd Young, a Republican senator from Indiana, and had broad bipartisan support. Similarly, 2008's CPSIA was a bipartisan legislation, and the original 1988 imitation firearms text was introduced by a Republican. To reiterate, this rule and its expedited handling is much more likely the result of someone at CPSC trying to just get their job done the quickest way possible because they didn't think they'd have to deal with creating a whole new category of sporting good until the Senate unexpectedly threw this at them while updating an old law. In fact, the foam hobby could treat this as an opportunity. The CPSC has now become aware of this category of equipment that we use, and it's important for us to claim a seat at the table to help secure the future of the business side of our hobby. So in the end, this is no reason to panic, but it's also more than a nothing sandwich. Please go to the regulations.gov page and leave a comment in support of more carefully thought out regulation of the tagging sports industry. Feel free to use the pre-written comment provided by Tinkershot and others, or write your own. And if you see people repeating misinformation in your community, send them to our video. A huge special thanks goes out to Blasterface, Tinkershot, and ASTM Airsoft Subcommittee Chair Michael Lucas for interviews and additional information that were invaluable in our work. And that's it for this special report. If you found this helpful, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on June 16th with our next full episode. I'm Serious KT. I'm sitting at a desk. You can tell that this is serious because I'm sitting at a serious desk. This is actually a folding table with a piece of fabric on it. We've provided a form letter you can use down in the comments. There's a cool wrong word. We have provided a form letter you can use down in the description, courtesy, my script says nom direct, which sounds delicious.
So that we can never have anything that looks like a gun ever again. If they had their way, we'd be playing with Barbie dolls and My Little Pony.